So guys, I'm gonna keep it short, straight, and simple with you. This is not gonna be one of those February best baits video. Simply because if you watch my January best baits video, my December and November best baits video, then you already know what I'm gonna talk about, because those are not really some things that I'm gonna stray away from. Like I said in those videos, this is typically what I'm gonna use all the way through March. There is some things though that we haven't talked about that I think kind of really need to be brought to your attention that can really help you on those days that maybe you're getting bites off a certain bait, but maybe it needs a little bit of tweaking. And that's typically what happens with us. We'll get on some type of like jig bite or something like that, and then all of a sudden it kind of slows down. But we do little modifications to our baits, and then all of a sudden that bite just blows back up again. So anyway, we're going to talk about some modifications to a few baits that you can use and go out there and catch a lot more fish during the month of February. So stay tuned. This is different. This is something you don't want to miss. All right guys, so jumping right into it, let's talk about one of the best bites that you can get on for big fish this time of year, and that's going to be a jig bite. Now, this time of year, depending on where you're at, you know, like if I'm fishing the river or something and I'm fishing like a lot of laydowns, a lot of things of that nature, I'm going to be throwing something like that War Eagle Heavy Finesse jig, 3/8 ounce, to get in that cover and stuff. This thing right here, it just comes through cover perfectly. But you can use a football head jig if you're out, like, you know, on a point or something like that, or you're fishing bluff walls, something that doesn't have a whole lot of cover on it. You know, choose your jig however you typically choose it. One of the main things you may not do is you're typically putting a grub, and I do it too, put a grub on the back of your jig. Well, instead of doing that, a lot of times actually putting a Ned worm on the back of your jig, what happens is it causes that jig, once it hits bottom, it doesn't necessarily just lay over super fast. Because what happens is, like, I use this Yum Ned worm, and in the Yum Ned worm, it's got a tunnel or a little channel right here at the end of the tail, which it has air in it. So what happens is, as this bait falls, it's going to fall straight down, and as that jig hits the bottom with that air in that tail, that jig tends to kind of slowly fall over instead of just absolutely just crash right on bottom. Okay, where this can be very productive is when you're pulling this bait out of cover, or, you know, across a point on a football head jig or something. It kind of keeps the back end of the bait up and the head down. So if you notice, a lot of times this time of year when I'm throwing a jig, I throw that bait out there and I kind of got my rod at like 4 o'clock and I'm just kind of slow reeling it. What happens is it keeps that nose down and keeps the back end of that bait up, and it moves across bottom. It's a very subtle action, and it's a slight change in the action, not necessarily the presentation of the bait, kinda, but not really, because you're still presenting the bait in the same way, but it gives the bait a more subtle action in this colder months. You know, use whatever kind of Ned worm you prefer. I like the Yum Ned worm simply because of that channel in the bottom of it. It, you know, holds air in it so the bait's not falling over, and it kind of really outshines everything else on the back of a jig, in my opinion, in the month of February. So give that little modification a try and let me know what you think down in the comments. Now, this one right here is kind of plain and simple. It's a jerkbait, right? But typically you hear this time of year people throw the jerkbaits out, and I'm the same way. Pop, pause 10, 15, 20 seconds, whatever the case may be. Pop, and just rinse and repeat, and either you get a bunch of bites or it doesn't really trigger bites. But I've noticed over this past, really from late November, December, and then all the way through January, it hasn't been as productive as it typically is through most years. So I actually tried something that Danny from over at Fish North Georgia, which is now called the Live Well podcast, told me about when I was on with him, and it paid off one day. And what that is I took this jerkbait, this one right here, this Rapala jerkbait. It's actually on one of the previous videos that we did. At the end of the day, we just kept fishing, and we found these fish that were feeding on shad. Well, I couldn't get them to bite the jerkbait, you know, jerk, pop. I think I may have caught 1 or 2, right? But they just wasn't actively feeding on the jerkbait. So what I started doing, I was like, well, I'll just do what Danny said and just see if it works, and I'll just start slow reeling it. And that's what I did, and it was fish after fish after fish after fish. So on this one, I'm using that Rapala. Remember the exact jerkbait that it is. I want to say like the Husky or something like like that, I'll have all the baits and stuff linked down in the comments. But either way, this is like an 8 to 10 foot diver, and basically what I do is I make a long cast past the fish, and then I kind of just slow reel it into the fish. Now I can get in that strike zone every now and again, stop, do a little pause, and then start reeling again. But 99% of the time, they'll, you know, react to that as you go to pop, and then you go to reel it. And what really kind of got me thinking that this would really work, there's been times when I've been out on the lake and I'm popping that jerk bait, not really getting bit, but as soon as I go to like pull the bait, maybe I didn't have as much slack as I thought that I do to pop that bait, and it pulls it a little bit, and then I get those bites. So, you know, it's kind of like, it just works. I don't know why, but, you know, give that a try if you're around a lot of fish that are feeding on shad this time of year, but they're not wanting to bite the jerk bait with you popping it. Now, with this one right here, this is actually one of my favorite ways to catch fish during the winter, simply because it's a moving style bait. So you may hear me say that with a couple of different baits, but you know, it's just kind of like there's this genre of moving baits that I really like to use during the winter because it's moving and it's freezing cold. So one of the first things is swapping over to a double Colorado spinnerbait. That water temp drops below 50 degrees. The double Colorado is 100% my go-to. One of the cool things about presenting this bait is you can slowly reel it and keep it in a certain area, or you can jig it. So picking that bait up, letting it fall, picking it up, letting it fall. But one of the modifications that I really like to do this time of year, especially as those water temps are super cold in February, is I will actually remove this skirt. And once I remove this skirt, I'll put something like the Rapala freeloader on the back of this. And what happens is, or what I think that happens is, and why this causes a lot more bites, you doesn't have that skirt just flurrying through the water, right? You doesn't have all this action. All you've got is a trailer that's just kind of steady, tight wiggling, and it causes that spinner bait also to just kind of shimmy side to side. So it gives it that kind of tight, lazy wobble that we look for in our baits this time of winter. So, you know, throwing that bait around cover, throwing that bait out on points, letting that thing hit bottom, slow rolling it, jigging it, stuff like that. But, you know, maybe you're on that good spinnerbait bite this time of winter, and then it just kind of slows down. You're like, what's going on? Sometimes those little small adjustments like that on a spinnerbait can cause you to get a lot more bites. Now, the very last one I want to talk about, this is one that I talked about in the video before, and that's going to be a dart head. Okay, you can use this kind of anywhere, but now we're not doing this like we do during the summer, like I've talked about before, where I'm shaking that bait and I'm picking it up, letting it fall, and they're just hammering it as it falls. We're not doing all that. Keeping things very simple. You guys who fish a lot of bluff walls, I'm throwing that bait out there, I'm letting it hit the water. As soon as it does, I'm clicking the bell and letting that bait just kind of glide back to the boat super slow. Every now and again, I'll give it a little shake. The main thing is you don't want to have slack in that line, because when they hit that bait, a lot of times they'll get it and they're gone. Okay, they're slowly swimming off with it, and you'll never know it. And so you swapping over that medium heavy rod, loosening up that drag, okay, where you still have that stiff rod, you still have the stiff line, the whole 9 yards, you can feel everything, but you're not going to pull that bait away when you officially, or you know, initially feel that strike. There's a few baits that I really like to use. That Zoom Tiny Fluke, that's a great one when I'm around, you know, like maybe I'm fishing a pond or something like that, and I've got tons of fish that are feeding on brim and crawfish and stuff like that. That's going to be perfect. That green pumpkin, nice. Now, one of the things that I do like better is that Demiki Armor Shad, okay? I typically like to go with the clear version, because if I'm dealing with super clean water and these fish are feeding on threadfin or anything like that, that's typically when I want to go with something very natural, something that, you know, they have a hard time making it out like, okay, is that something real or is that not something real? And the whole time you're keeping it super subtle. Now, the other one's kind of like a Ned head modification. So the other one that I'm going to put on that darter head is going to be a Ned worm, some type of Ned worm, whatever you prefer to use. Another great one, like I talked about earlier, was, you know, that Yum Ned. You can put that on there. It'll keep that bait pointing up. But I actually like to use something like the Robo Worm or the Z-Man or something like that on the darter head, simply because it's going straight down, and once it hits bottom, it's going to be falling over. You can slightly hop that bait off bottom. You can kind of just slowly twitch it. It's kind of a super finessey way to get a ton of bites, no matter where you're at. So either way, guys, I really appreciate you stopping by. I hope the video helped you. If it did, make sure to hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Love y'all. See y'all next time.